Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Badbaby. And tonight we have Dr. Joye Jefferies Pugh with us, and we are going to be talking about Princess Diana and Prince William, and I want to talk a little bit about the Queen. But before we get started, and I just want to say real quick that it has been one hell of a week for me. My targeting has been very, very heavy. My health has been very poor all week. My blood pressure has been skyrocketing. And I just want to tell the targets out there to hang in there, that you're not alone. We're all suffering. And there are quite a few things that are going on in the world today. And I hope that soon this will all come to an end for us. Just remember, everything has a beginning and everything has an ending. And for those that are harming us, I'm going to send you love regardless. Dr. Joye, how are you this evening?
I'm doing fine. How are you tonight?
I'm not doing fine. I've been battling with my blood pressure all week. They've been radiating me up here on the corner, and right now we're broadcasting from inside my Faraday cage.
Oh, my gracious.
Well, I had my birthday this week, and whenever I have a birthday, they always come at me. And you know, it's a day to remember in my life. They've killed my animals on my birthday, and so they're trying to make me have a stroke, I think, and I've been battling it, and it's been a rough week, a very rough week.
So when was your birthday?
It was Tuesday.
Do you see, mine's tomorrow. I can't get over how close our birthdays are.
You know, whenever I tell people it's my birthday, I've got another friend that's listening right now. Her birthday is tomorrow, too.
Oh, how neat. That is so cool. I mean, I like to find when people have the same birthday. It's pretty neat to me.
Yeah, you're still Capricorn, right?
No, Aquarius.
Aquarius, yeah, because I'm on the cusp.
I think the 19th is the cutoff on that or something.
Yeah, because everybody on my Facebook page was saying you're on the cusp. I do have a listener that had wrote a poem, a short poem. She'd like to read it before we get started, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, sounds great. I love poetry.
Okay, and we'll unmute her. Hello, are you with us, Arizona?
Yes, I am. And Dr. Joye, it's my birthday tomorrow, too.
Oh, how neat. This is so neat. Oh, it's amazing. Wonderful.
Yes, it's my birthday tomorrow, too. So, but I wanted to, I guess this will be for everybody.
Happy birthday to all the birthday girls.
For everybody. But this is specifically for Badbaby. And now a message from Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. At the watering hole, the wildebeest are gossiping the news. It's somebody's birthday, and she may have the blues. So they all told the zebras, who in turn told the giraffes. They told all the elephants. They even told their calves. Pretty soon, the whole savannah knew that they must sing. All the lions and the bears and every bird on wing. So they sent up a chorus. All the grasslands rang. Even though it was raucous, this is what they sang. Hippo birdie to use, hippo birdie to use, hippo birdie, dear Badbaby. Hippo birdie to you, and many more. Breakfast Mitchell, did you know that it is Badbaby's birthday party? From all of us at Mutual of Omaha, happy birthday. And now, back to Jim in the tiger cage, watching Manuel wrestling with a pack of hungry hyenas. But seriously, happy birthday, Bad Baby.
Thank you, sweetheart. That was cute.
Yes, that was adorable.
It always puts a smile on my face when she reads. She writes poems for me all the time.
I love poetry. I started writing poetry as a small child, and poetry is very special to me, too, and that was really, really cute.
Very sweet.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a labor of love.
Okay, well, we're going to mute you back real quick so we can get started here.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Joy. Oh, my God, I've been looking at so much stuff. You know, I was just reading an article about the Queen, but we'll talk about her later. Oh, man. I just can't believe what these people got in store for us. But let's get started, though. Did you get the email that I sent you about the Denver airport?
When did you send that to me? Today?
No, I sent it right before I invited you. I guess when I did invite you, I sent you a link of the pictures, and then it was in relation to the blonde-haired boy that's painted into the murals. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I'm very aware of that. Yes,
So that's where I want to start. Let's talk about why Prince William is painted in those murals.
You know, that's the thing that's so amazing to me is how the game is being played right under our nose and right in our face. And I think that's the thing that got me in doing the research is that the more I became aware of what the other side was up to and could see that it's right in our face, but if you don't know the signs, you'll just not think about it. You won't put two and two together. And so when they could use like their double stick and hand guards and stuff like that to show to each other or paintings or whatever, and you know how to look at it, or if they give you some kind of document and it's got a code to it and it's easy for them to read, but it looks like gibberish to us, you know, the more that I studied it, it just really became, you know, very aware to me that this has been going on a long time, and it's coming to fruition now because we're in the days. I mean, we are fulfilling every one of the prophetic things that, you know, the prophets wrote about. So you can't deny that if that's the case, that these evil beings that are here among us are not playing a game to get ready for what they know is coming down the pike at them. I mean, they are very aware that the jig is going to be up after a while, and right now, to me, they're at their highest in a level of beguilement and using this double speak just right in our faces. It's really a type of black magic and alchemical magic. And the more I studied those things years ago, like I say, I just began to find these things all over the place. And I know at my website, people can go look where I took Da Vinci's work and show you how he used double mirrors and all kinds of, you know, mirrors and things to paint these terrible, ugly, oh my gosh, evil-looking things within his paintings, and you're standing there thinking how pretty that is or how wonderful the painting is, and you don't realize it's something evil. It's really being processed in your subliminal brain while you stare at it. So, you know, when I started seeing what was going on in the Denver airport, I would have given anything to have gone and looked at that directly myself. But I did have a really good friend working on his PhD that did go there to, you know, to review those and take some original photographs so that I could look at that and be able to, almost like I was there, because his research is very much on the line of what I do. And I knew that when he went, he wasn't going to try to, you know, fool me or send me back a picture that was hoax, like so much of the hoax stuff that's going on the internet right now. It just, oh my gosh, it just seems like every time you pick up something, somebody's tried to fool somebody. And, you know, like you say, there's the little blonde-headed kid that's right there and all this stuff, and it can't be denied. and I go all the way back in my research. When I first started looking for the Antichrist, one of the first things that I felt like that somebody was trying to put out was, if you remember the movie The Omen, and the little kid that was there was blonde-haired, and he was into a ritzy family and had the credentials to do these kinds of things. So I felt like a long time that this was a play kind of going on, and if you could pick up on who was behind it, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, that the puppets are being put around all in front of us, but you got to figure out who's the puppet master, who's the guy behind the curtain that's running the show that make these things happen. And, I think it's pretty tragic when you think about in our country, and the Denver airport is a huge airport. Just think about the numbers of children that walk through that airport, every day. And for, to me, the Department of Aviation or Department of whoever that has anything to do with that airport, to me, that's child abuse, because the pictures are depicting such terrible things happening to children.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got children laying in caskets. You've got, men with gas masks and carrying Uzis, and I mean, it just is a nightmare for a child to be walking through there looking at that. And to me,
read that it scares a lot of children, and the parents tell them not to look away. Even in the baggage area, they've got the gargoyles jumping out of suitcases.
Oh,
those
yes,
are scary-looking things.
Oh, yes, I really wanted to see it, because the first time I saw that, I thought, oh, man, somebody has sent me a hoax picture. That's the first thing I thought. Somebody's hoaxed this. That's not really there. So when I was talking to my friend, I said, if anything, I want you to make sure you get a picture, if it's out there, of that suitcase with that gargoyle coming out of it. And sure enough, boy, when he started sending the pictures back, that was one of the first ones he had, and he says, it's real. And he says it's so ugly and so makes you feel like your skin will literally crawl. In South Georgia, and a lot of the old buildings that are in our area, there are gargoyles. And, when I was a child, I can remember looking up, and, of course, there are like water spouts at the very top of these buildings, so the water would come out the mouth of those gargoyles. But the fact that you would have anything that looked like that, oh, my gosh, on a building. I mean, they are horrific-looking creatures. But then they're also very much like when you talk about the great serpent, if you go to the city of London, it's nothing but these serpents everywhere, that are, they're like dragons. They're like these gargoyle-looking dragon things. And it's like they're everywhere, and people just accept that that's okay to walk around and be around, but it cannot do anything but give you the creeps. I mean, literally. And to me, to put something like that out in the Denver airport for every little kid to come by and ponder and look at or be afraid of, I think it's child abuse. I think somebody should have taken them to court for something to have that like that. I mean, if they wanted to do an art museum somewhere, and that was going to be somebody's big thing, like they've done some crazy stuff with Christ, in some of these museums, and that's your right to be artistic. But to me, in a public airport and something like that, there is something major, major wrong. Of course, there's always been the belief that under that airport is a huge, huge area of underground caverns, and interesting enough, Queen Elizabeth owns a bunch of land out there, so it makes it a little more interesting once you know all the little pieces of the puzzle, concerning that airport.
Well, I had read that she has, in the last year, moved all her possessions into the underground facilities, and I just read an article today that, well, let me tell you what it says real quick for the heading here. Very interesting at what she's pushing, because at Christmas time she said, "I hope you enjoy your last Christmas."
Oh yes, they said that was what was cut.
British Crown pushing for war and genocide in 2016. A careful survey of British intelligence operations around the globe reveal a clear picture the British monarchy is provoking war and chaos in every corner of the globe in pursuit of the stated goal of reducing the world population by 80%.
Well, that follows the protocols of Zion that, people have always said we're non-existent or we're a fake kind of protocol set up. But, when you go back and you read those protocols, that's exactly what's happening. And, of course, in Elberton, Georgia, which is in North Georgia, I'm in South Georgia, but in North Georgia, and I've been to see this, they have like a Stonehenge thing made out of granite up there, and it has really the population is going to be reduced, and it's really the same premises of what the protocols of Zion were stating. And so when you see that, and you see, like, for example, that the British are doing these kinds of things, and then what's going on, like, out there in the Denver airport thing, and then, of course, that up in the Antarctica they have the seed vault, that they're taking all the, known seeds of the world, and they're putting them away. And, that place is guarded by people. They'll kill you. If you don't have the right to be there, they'll blow you away. So, it's kind of like I can go back and look at some of the research that I did on the Epic of Gilgamesh in my book, Even the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666. The fact that when the Noah's flood came about, and he built the ark and that kind of thing, Ron White did some archaeological findings down at the base of Ariat, in which he found what he thought was a type of a ship. And it had some metal and stuff in it. Of course, we know that the ark did not have metal in it. Metalworking was, of course, the things that Cain's lineage was involved in. But the fact is, he swore, according to his findings, that there were, some unusual giant-looking things buried around in that area and whatever. But according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, there was this particular person that went on their particular ark, and they took like a biological ship of seeds. It wasn't like like Noah with the animals. It was like they had a biological laboratory of nothing but seeds. So I find it interesting that the days that we know happened according to biblical scripture in regard to Noah, that there may have been an attempt by what I call the serpent lineage to try to make it across, the flood, and unfortunately their boat sank. But the thing is, if it sank and it had those seeds, which the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about, then it's just interesting again that when it talks about in the Bible that our end of days will be like the days of Noah. Well, if that's the case, and during Noah's time, if those those beings that were serpent lineage knew that the jig was about to be up with them, they could have attempted to do something. So now when you see like the seed vault and you see the Denver airport and underground stuff, and you find that the Vatican, has a telescope out in Arizona that they're trying to watch for this wormwood, which is a huge asteroid that's literally going to slam into the earth. It's kind of like it's back like the days of Noah. They know the time's getting close, and they're trying to prepare to make it across the, the tribulation or whatever. They think that they're going to pull it out this time. But unfortunately, just like what happened during Noah's flood, their boat sank. And if that was what Ron White actually uncovered down there, and which I feel probably it was, because it did go along with the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Sumerian writings that were done during that time. So, it only makes me feel like once you know that Satan exists and all his little cronies are doing all this, it just kind of proves that God exists along with it, because they're trying so desperately hard to corral us, confuse us, manipulate us, and then they're trying to find ways to protect themselves. So that kind of goes along with the days of Noah, when they were eating, drinking, being merry, and then the rains came.
I find it interesting. For the last 2 years, I've been doing shows about Planet X, and everyone would say, "Woohoo, she's crazy. Oh, there ain't no such thing.
Yeah.
And then today they finally, and I knew that eventually they would come out and have to tell us right around the time when we're going to start seeing it. And there are very many pictures that I've been viewing and videos and people with telescopes, and yeah, it's becoming visible. That's why they can't deny it. So what do? They come out with this false story saying, oh, it's on the edge of our solar system, and we just found it. You know, I mean, there's
it's like 3 times the size of everything. You know, it's on the other side of Pluto. I know, and you and I both know this is the game, and really this is the reason I named my last series Beguiled, because the beguilement of humanity has been so bad. I mean, literally, and it's still continuing. And like you say, it's like I can look at several things that they play the game with like this. They played the game with the fact that there's nothing out there when we know there is. They played the game that Shroud Turin is a fake relic when finally they're having to say that it is from the time of Christ because science has proven it and they can't disprove it. There's too many people that had pieces of that shroud that now have come forward, so they can't keep lying about it. And then the Noah's Ark. I mean, okay, we can't go up there because Turkey won't let us, and we can't go up there because it's going to be a fight. Well, excuse me, we can supposedly go to Mars, and we can't sit something on top of that mountain to evaluate something. You and I know that the thing about it, those 3 things, when they say wormwood's out there, when they say that Shroud of Turin is real, and when they say they got a piece of Noah's Ark, what does that tell you? That those 3 things are biblically proving everything that's in that Bible. That Christ resurrected, he's not dead, he's coming back, his blood is not like a regular human, and then you've got wormwood is coming after us, and I don't care what they say. Star Wars, whatever. The Bible says it's going to hit us, and it's going to hit us. And the same thing about Noah's Ark. When you prove that was real, then that goes back and says to all the other religions, hello, people, there's always been a flood historical story, and all the known races of people have had their own flood stories, every last one of them. Well, when you tie it back, and the Bible's telling you all this stuff, so you're starting to prove that what the Bible said is correct using science. And that's what I started trying to do, of course, when I started writing my books, was to take and use science to prove that what the Bible was saying all along was correct. So, if anything, science has proven the correctness of biblical scripture.
And I find it so interesting that they're trying to use the Pope to convince us that the Bible isn't so, because he's coming out and saying that the Bible's a lie.
Well, he's got to tweak it a little bit, because if he doesn't tweak it, he can't bring the Muslims and the Hindus and the shamans and atheists. He can't bring them all under one umbrella and make it like, well, we all worship the same God by different names, and you don't have to be saved, and you don't have to, come to salvation like that. God loves everybody. He's not going to be bad. He loves everybody. Well, for you to unite people under a one-world religion, this is the same premise that was used by Constantine when he wanted to unite the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was torn completely apart. There were Christians, there were Jews, there were pagans, whatever. And so he came up with a great idea. Let's all work together. And he develops the Catholic Church. And so in the Catholic Church, they take some of the goddesses and all the statues that were pagan, and they make them look like they're Christ or Mary, and it's really the old Isis and Horus, and you incorporate the Christmas and the Easter and all the pagan stuff in with the Christian stuff, and then all of a sudden everybody's just real happy because now we can kind of do our thing and we can work together, and that's how he united his kingdom. So what does it tell us about the end of days? The false prophet is going to have to bring about a full-scale world religion. The only way he can do that is to have that same kind of premise that, hey, everybody, we can kind of use this and this and this, and we'll all work together because it's for the good of mankind, like values.com. We can all sit around because we want these values of loving each other and whatever. And the Bible tells you that, you cannot be saved unless you are following Jesus Christ and you're using him as your, means of salvation. And if you're not willing to, confront your sins and know that you are a sinner, and if you don't feel condemnation, then you won't seek salvation. So it's false prophet. I mean, that's what a false prophet does. He keeps you from thinking you need to seek salvation. He keeps you from feeling condemned, because condemnation, of course, I was born in South Georgia and live in South Georgia, and so we had some really good hell and fire, spitting the fire down from heaven preachers to tell you, if you don't get straight, you're going to go straight to hell. No, that's the way they used to preach a long, long time ago. They didn't take this, well, God loves everybody, and, we want to get rich. Now, you give me plenty of money, and you're going to get a big, nice car out there in your driveway. I mean, literally, it was not watered down. They picked up that Bible, and, you felt when you were sitting in a church that if you didn't find that condemnation about what you were doing wrong, if you walked out there and thought, oh, well, it's okay for me to steal, it's okay for me to have adultery, it's okay for me to covet my, next door's neighbor, if you didn't feel condemnation about that, you will not seek salvation. And to me, that's what a false prophet is having people do, because a true man of God is going to correct you, because if he doesn't correct you, it's just like your father or your mother, if they said, well, little Joy, I don't really want to spank you, so just don't do that anymore. It'll be okay, and I love you still. Well, if they just kept doing that to you without tearing your rear end up or sending you to your room or, taking away certain privileges, you would not have, or even spanking you, if you had not had that happen to you, the Bible tells you, then you're going to get a wild child. And once that happens, you have got to follow the law. You have got to follow the commandments. And if you don't learn to do that and feel condemnation, then you become a society of lunatics running around doing what they want to do, which, by the way, is what's happening to the United States. Because when you don't follow the law and a policeman pulls you over and says, get out of the car, and you say, I'm not doing that, I don't have to do that. And then when he goes up there and then you pull a gun and he's scared he's going to get shot, he shoots you, then we turn around and go, oh, it was okay for them to shoot the policeman? I mean, we're getting to the point that if you don't follow the law, they never go back and look at any case that says, why was the guy or the girl at this place at this time? If they hadn't been doing wrong to begin with, there's 100% chance that nobody would be dead right now. Nobody would be hurt. But they'll go back and want to blame it on somebody instead of where it needs to go. And that is, when you know you're doing wrong, you raise your hands up and say, hey, I was in the wrong. A long time ago, people did that. They didn't back talk people. You didn't do anything like in schools, for example. There was a recent review on TV about a little kid that jumped on the school teacher and was beating the school teacher up. I mean, excuse me, we would have never thought about even talking back to a school teacher when I was in school. I mean, you were taught total respect. You sat there quiet. You did what the teacher asked you to do, and if I had said anything wrong, my mother and my father, when I got home and they would have found out that I would have said something or talked back to anybody that was my elder without having respect, that was just not that was uncalled for. So when you don't have groups of people who feel condemnation and they are so involved with selfie, me, that is the spirit of Cain. And that is the spirit that's going to return at the end of days. And I have never seen it more prevalent than now.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that statement.
It's just terrible.
Right. So I was looking at the pictures of Denver airport where the little blonde-haired boy is in there. And then I compared it to pictures that were put up of Prince William. And honest to God, they had to actually use that picture to do that painting.
No, that's the thing, is how similar it is. It's like I say, it's not being hid like you would think. It's really, like I said, it's right in your face. And that's the thing, you know, when I first started pointing my fingers at, you know, the royals being kind of the serpent lineage, the Merovingian connections, and their connections to the tribe of Dan and the Khazarian groups, and that the Windsors are all Germans, and their best friend was Hitler. And oh my gosh, you know, the more I uncovered in my research, I'm like, oh, you know, the very people who want to rule the world are going to have to be the very people who put the Antichrist in power. I mean, literally, it can't come from somebody that they don't know anything about. It's got to be it's got to head them up. And
how did you come about finding the facts that they used the DNA off the shroud?
When I first started doing the research on the Shroud Turin, you know, that's when I found out that they had taken blood samples off that shroud back in the 60s and in the 70s. The Stirrup Committee had done that. That was the scientific research for the Shroud Committee. And those blood samples at that time in their reports were cloned, and they were using different strands to determine, you know, if this person was Jewish or whatever. When the Stirrup Committee was put over there to do that research on that shroud, they were writing scientific papers. They weren't trying to write something for the, you know, Esquire or some of these New Yorker magazines or whatever. They were literally doing scientific analysis. And so, you know, once you realize that the blood was taken off and that they were doing some genetic testing back before even DNA was even understood, you kind of go like, okay, why would you want to know that? And of course, to me, it proves that if anything, the blood on the shroud is the most I guess, sought after blood that could ever be sought after. We're talking about Jesus Christ. We're talking about the Son of God. So, you know, his blood is just, that would be the greatest thing since peanut butter. And when I first got involved with studying about the shroud and how it was the cloth of Edessa and trying to trace it historically from the time it left Jerusalem, that was there in the tomb when the disciples came, and the shroud and the face napkin, of course, were there together. And it's mentioned in the Gospels. And then how Joseph of Arimathea, they believe, is who really took the shroud, and they call it the cloth of Edessa because it was put into the walls there in Edessa to keep it from anybody stealing it. The Knights Templar, in fact, did take that cloth. They did find that cloth, and it became their prized possession all the way up until King Umberto really bequeathed it to the Pope. And during the time that the Templars had it, they did, historically trace it. As I have, they did display that cloth. So, you know, there's a historical record of when that cloth was actually brought out and shown when these, what I call royal people of the Templars, allowed people to see what they had and owned. And then when I had always, since I had been, I guess, in junior high school, the Legends of Camelot, King Arthur was something that I was just more than enamored with. I had a teacher that was very much into the Canterbury Tales and the medieval kinds of stuff, and it was fascinating to me. And about that same time is when the movie came out that Richard Harris played King Arthur in Camelot, and he took my class to see that movie, and I fell in love with Richard Harris. I mean, I just loved his music and everything, and I just thought that show was just beyond words as a child, and just cherished every aspect of that from a mythological standpoint. But the fact that I got an early introduction into it and had such a love for the music, because it was a musical and the music that was involved in it, it made me search a little bit more into what is this Camelot thing? What is it? What is it all about? And then when I realized that the Knights Templar, that their big thing was King Arthur, the Round Table, and more than anything, that their Grail cup that was supposedly held the blood of Christ was to be carried through history, and that King Arthur, when he died, they were going to take that blood and one day raise it again as a child. That was their big thing and desire alchemically, was to birth a child from King Arthur's blood. So that's where I got, I guess, my first indication that there might be something a little bit more to this, because when I started studying the Rosicrucians and realized that they were trying to keep flesh alive and had been able to do it, and then, of course, did the research on the first tumor that was ever taken out of a woman and found out that tumor, pieces of it are still alive today in a Petri dish, because the more you feed proteins and certain types of protein to flesh, you can keep it alive. So there was this desire, it appeared, alchemically, to find a way to beat dying. In other words, to find the death gene, to find the divine spark, to find the philosopher's stone. There's all kinds of words that they used. But the biggest thing was this King Arthur was going to live again as a child. And finding the connection to that, to the Merovingians, and then, of course, knowing they had the Shroud of Turin. And the Shroud of Turin, it's the Grail Cup. It is literally the facet of how that blood came through history. It's been on that cloth the entire time. And where people were trying to push and say, well, that's false, that's fake, and I was like, no, that's not false, it's not fake, and one day it's going to be proved that it's just as authentic as it is. The face napkin that was there in the tomb with the shroud has exactly the same blood spots in exactly the same places as the shroud does, because they put that over the face. That was typically when they would do shrouds back in those days. They would put the face napkin over the face and then lay the shroud. So that cloth of Odessa, carries it way back to the time of Christ. And then when you look at the Siderian face napkin, it has been in Spain since about 500 years, actually 500 years after Christ rose from the dead. So that napkin, face napkin, had never been anywhere else. It always was known that was the napkin. Well, it's interesting that you've got this shroud that's going all over the place, and that napkin has stayed in one place, and yet they have the same blood, the same spots on the same area, and they match perfectly. In fact, with the scientific research that's been done on it, now the pollen and everything else that's on those two pieces of cloth match up. And you've got the thorns and the thorn plant that was in Jerusalem that's on the shroud, the pollen's there. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind that, and like I say, they've tried to discredit it, but when Pope Francis, when he came on as Pope, that first Easter, he had to come out because they had just done some more research on it, and they had proven that it came from the time the shroud was there in the days of Christ. So, Francis turned around and said, we have proof now that this cloth is from the time of Jesus Christ. Well, they didn't make a big to-do about it, and very few people really picked up on it because they had heard so much back in 1988 that, the cloth is, it's a fake, it's got a medieval, dating based on carbon-14, all this kind of stuff. But they never heard when they had to retract all that, because there were several people who had pieces of that cloth that had done the start that didn't give back to the Vatican. In fact, the Vatican demanded all the cloth that had been taken off of there back. But what happened was, when they cut that cloth, they knew they were cutting a spot that had been damaged. So they knew that they were going to get a false indicating of date-wise using carbon dating, because the shroud is total linen. But the pieces of the cloth they cut were mixed with cotton and linen. And when there was a terrible fire there in Turin, it almost burned. And so the nuns had stitched around the kind of the outside of the cloth to keep it, from shredding and tearing or doing anything. And there's, of course, watermarks on the shroud itself that you can see from that when the fire was put out. But if you take cloth and you carbon date that with where the cotton fibers were, you're going to get a skewed response. They knew that, and this what's got me is that the people that knew that cloth was like that took the sample from that area. Excuse me, do I want to just be a stupid idiot or what? I guess they thought nobody would find out, but what happened was somebody had a piece of it, and they sent it to a textile industry person, and then they were like, oh, well, what's this cotton doing in there? Because no shroud, especially the shroud that covered Jesus' body from, Joseph's Arimathea, those people were totally Hebraic. The worst thing you could ever do would have been to mix your linen with wool or anything else, because that was considered an abomination. You don't mix things. It's a pureness. So that linen was pure. So immediately red flags went up, and they had to come back and tell everybody, oh, my gosh, we did take it from the wrong place, and it did have this in it. Well, they made a retraction, but see, all the big news media had already promoted it was a fake, and nobody came back and said, well, it's not a fake. This is what we have found. So people wrote it off, and that was the intent for them to do, is to write it off, just like you were talking about the asteroids and stuff like that. They just want to make a jest out of it, and they just want to write it off. But those kinds of things are what started me seeing that better pay a lot of attention to this Camelot, King Arthur, Merovingian bloodlines, and that you better be paying attention that this cloth is really real, and that the blood has been taken off of it, and if that blood is the blood of Jesus, that I truly believe it is, then somebody knows that is worth a fortune. And the person who has it, there's no telling what you can do with it. Well, when I first started thinking about that, I was thinking that if you cloned it, my gracious, you could bring Jesus back and it'd be the greatest thing since peanut butter. But then I realized, the Bible tells us once to die, and the spirit goes back to God, send it, and that kind of stuff. You're not to go back. We don't have reincarnation stuff going on. So if you have a shell, and I'd already done the research back on the golems, the Jewish Kabbalists had written about, in which you had beasts of the field that didn't have a soul in them, and I had studied a little bit of that, but going back to the Garden of Eden and looking at what was the first male and female that were created outside the garden before Adam and Eve were created inside of the garden, and saw the connection as how that was tying in to keeping flesh alive, and why Shelley wrote Frankenstein and all this kind of stuff. And it was interesting to me that when I first started seeing about cloning, it was that to make something come alive like that, you had to electrify it. Well, what do you do in Frankenstein? You electrified it. What did you do in Jewish Kabbalism for a golem? You electrify him to make him come alive, but it didn't have a spirit inside of him. And so I began to look at, well, okay, what was Hitler doing? Hitler was looking at the best scientists to find out what is it that you can do genetically to make a superior race. In other words, blonde hair, blue-eyed, but very intelligent. All these kind of things he had his underground people, working with. And then the fact that he had gotten a hold of the spear of destiny, which is the spear that pierced Jesus' side. He owned that. He was after the viewing of the shroud. He wanted the shroud. And then you find out that the connection is that the Vatican was working with Hitler and may have had a lot to do with his top scientists being able to get out of the country and go to South America, where there's a huge, what they call Twin City, down there where there's nothing but twins, that they truly believe came from, these top-notch geneticists that were brought down in that area through the Vatican and gotten out of Germany to continue that particular research on twins. And if you understand,
he was fascinated with twins.
Oh yes, that's exactly right. So his whole intent was to build something that was identical. When you start looking at what did Satan want? He wanted to be God. That was his intent. He wanted to be God. And the big I guess, bell ringer in my head was when I went back and looked at what was Jesus talking about, why did he keep saying, be careful at the end of days, there's going to be people saying that they're Jesus, you're going to see him here and there. But the biggest thing is, in Thessalonians it says, he says this thing is going to be, he's going to proclaim he's God standing in the temple of God. And when I read the temple of God, I'd always, had heard that they'll build a temple over there in Jerusalem, and then the Antichrist will walk in, and, he's going to proclaim himself God. But when I started looking at what the Hebrew and Greek words were in the Bible and saw that the Greek in Revelation was talking about an iconic image, is what John the Revelator was using for beast, was iconic image. An iconic image, if you go back, the first iconic image was Jesus. And that was a painting that was done that was stayed at the mount, at the bottom of base of the Mount, Sinai, that they had a monastery there that's still there, and that was one of the first, the first, what they call icon. And so then I looked back at, what was it Jesus was telling these people, when he went before the Pharisees and Sadducees. They specifically were asking, him, was he God, this, that, and the other. And he finally told them, he said, you're going to try to destroy this temple, and I'm going to build it back up in 3 days. And, they just laughed at him because they thought he meant he was going to rebuild a temple that took them 40 years to build. But he wasn't. He was talking about his body. So he called his body the temple. And then like I say, then scientifically I started looking at things, especially the pineal gland, and seeing how the cross-section of that looks like the Ark of the Covenant, and realizing that our body is kind of set up like the temple. And then I looked at the temple and the temple of your body, and in your eye and your temple, should be an eye of light, and realizing that's probably your pineal gland, but it's a workable gland. It just kind of all started coming together that, here you have somebody like Hitler, you have the Germans who are very into this. They wanted these particular pieces of history for a very specific reason. The fact that the royals, and then you've got this Camelot mythology about King Arthur living again, and then you realize that you've got a group of people that were Germans that were very good friends, and they actually changed their name to Windsor so nobody would pay attention to that connection. And then you realize that the Rothschilds, who established really the state of Israel and flew their so-called flag, which, they renamed it the Star of David, but it was actually above and below triangle that was a part of the Rothschild family crest. It's kind of strange that Hitler was killing and doing all these things to these Jews, but yet he was letting other Jews go. And so when I did the research on that, I found out the Jews that he was killing were true Hebraic, Israelite, pure Jews, and they were not mixed Khazarian Jews. And these Rothschilds were mixed. They were mixed Khazarians. So your pure Israelites and your pure Hebrews, if they had never mingled with the Babylonians, because when they went into Babylonian captivity, what happened was that Hebrews and Israelites were told not to intermingle or ever marry. In fact, Moses was told to kill every woman, child, and whatever when you come across these people and get rid of them, but yet they started mingling, and then they were captured. And so what happened was they were not any longer true, pure Hebrew or Israelite if they married a Babylonian. And so when you marry a Babylonian, then what's your child? We've heard terms of mulatto and things like that, but they didn't have a term for that. So that's how the word or the term Jew came about. But your true Hebraic, pure lineages were Hebraic, and they were Israelite coming from Jacob, who became Israel when he wrestled there with God, and then he had Jacob and the tribes, and get the 12 tribes of Jacob. So that was a real big red flag too, because now I'm finding out that Hitler has let the Rothschilds start up a place called Israel, where we know the temple, that they had over in the day when the Pharisees, Sadducees, and all were there. But they're Khazarians. They're not true Hebrews and Israelites. And then you've got the Windsor family, who were not Anglican, they were absolutely Germans. They go and they establish, England. Of course, we know where the British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire, still doesn't set on the British Empire. And then you've got the connection of them with all the historical proof that they are from the lineage of King David through King Solomon. And that was something that Queen Victoria, pranced around and made sure was always posted everywhere, because when the last temple burned in 70 A.D., supposedly nothing was left of any way to trace the lineages. So they would be the only people on the planet that supposedly have an ability to trace themselves all the way back to King David. And when I was showing that in my research, I'm like, okay, now I got a connection to somebody that could rule. I got a connection to somebody that has the right to rule over that particular area. And the more I saw that there was connections to Israel in a way that's different than what we've been taught about Israel. And when you realize that the British had everything to do with the formation of Israel, and how the Rothschilds, you can't, all the gold has their name on it. I mean, it just gets to be this bigger picture. And the more research I did on it, there's all these connections of people who would have the capability, if there was such thing as bringing something back to life, because you've got the money, you've got the power, you've got the people who are the scientists, you've got the genetics, and then you've got the Grail cup. You've got the very thing that could prove by checking the blood on the spear, by checking the blood on the cloth, and then by checking the blood on even, there's always been somebody's got the nails, all that kind of stuff, even pieces of the cloth. If you have that and you have the scientific ability to check it, then you know that this is, in fact, the real thing. You're not playing with something. And I think that there's where it all began. And like I say, it just is this big agenda. and the thing that just really just kind of was like, oh my gosh, is when Prince Charles marries Diana, and she brings in the House of Stuart, which also connects, oh my gosh, to the tribe of Dan and everything else in this New Beguile series. When I started tracing all that back, it just blew my mind, because it makes her Jewish, and who she really was, and I try to expose all that.
Well, I found something out interesting this week about the Queen. Before they allowed them to get married, Diana and Charles, she actually took Diana's eggs and Charles' sperm to see if to test their DNA for some reason, and that the doctor that did this kept one of the eggs.
Oh yeah.
And it was used to inseminate a woman in New York City, and that Diana has a daughter. Did you ever hear of that?
Yes, I've heard that story, and I've read some of the research on that. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I do know that truthfulness is there was something major about being able to go to these doctors, and that Diane herself, extensively made comments that on her wedding night, that Charles was engrossed in all these paranormal books of black magic, and how that kind of freaked her out that he was so engrossed in this for some reason. And the fact that when she became pregnant, if you go, I have a huge library of photographs of Diana. She's not a happy camper in these photographs. I mean, it's quite obvious. There's something, you look at her and you can see. I remember being 20 years of age, and I can go back and look at pictures when I was unhappy or something was happening in the family. I can look at my photo and know something's not right. And I can look at those photos of Diana and go, here you have just married Prince Charles, the biggest wedding of the century. I mean, everybody loves you. You can have whatever you want. I mean, why aren't you just like so elated that your teeth, are so smiling that you're so happy? But they're not. There's this sadness. And the thing about it is, she even made comments that he was still in love with Camilla. Well, why didn't he marry Camilla? He's ended up with Camilla. Well, you've got to understand, Camilla couldn't carry that baby. She was not able to carry that child. And that's why when Diana was interviewed by Jane Pauley and different people, she said, I was a birthing chamber. I was a birthing chamber. Charles never loved me. In other words, I've been used. And the thing about it is, when she found out she was pregnant, she literally tried to kill herself. She threw herself down the stairs with him, pregnant with the king that she knew was going to be the king of England. She knew that her child that she was carrying was going to be the king of England, and she threw herself downstairs and tried her best to kill herself. So it tells you that there was something terrible. And then when she was trying to get away from them and she knew they were going to kill her, she stood on TV and said, they're lizards. I mean, what else could you tell somebody? But the problem is, you're common people, unless you have studied like I have, you don't know what she's talking about. You think she's just calling, well, those guys are dogs, you know. It's like when you say, man, he's just a dog down in South Georgia. She was saying they're lizards. And when you study the lizards, you know what she's talking about.
This is why they kill children and drink their blood.
Yes.
Because cannot survive without that innocent blood.
Yes. So all that stuff can't be denied. And so you can't say that it's a conspiracy, because it's like I told somebody in an interview the other night, when I was studying to be an attorney, and I would want to, write my books to be able to say to a judge, look, here's the proof. There's too much proof about this to just push it under the rug. It's just over and over and over and over and again in your face. And the fact that Charles wanted to name William Arthur, I mean, he and Diana went round and round about this. She would not allow him to name that child Arthur. Well, they ended up with William, but what did they make his next name? Arthur. So it's Will, I am, Arthur. And if you ever hear or ever saw Diana, she never called William William. She called him Wills or Will. So if you think about in the past of your royals, they typically take the name of the father. In other words, if it was William Charles, whatever, like Harry, or, his brother is really, the second name is Charles, and like Charles had Philip, which was his daddy's name, second, Philip, and then Charles was Charles, Philip, Arthur. But then he names William Arthur, and William doesn't have Charles's name. He's the only one. So when you go back and you think, okay, well, let's start back in the Garden of Eden, and then think about Adam and Adam's lineage. There's not Cain, because Cain was not Adam was not Cain's father. So it's only interesting that William doesn't have Charles's name. He's got a long list of names, but he doesn't have Charles's name in there. And there was all this question before Diana died. They wanted to say that Prince Harry's daddy was not Charles, and then they were supposed to have gone and got some blood work done, and then Diana's comment was it was as it should be. It never said, oh, yeah, Charles is their daddies. It didn't. She never said that. She says it's as it should be, which is a very strange comment. Coming from a woman, as you say, and the people are lizards,
After the accident, and they were preparing for the funeral, I read an article that they started up the crematory and evacuated the town because they didn't want anybody knowing that they cremated her body.
Well, the thing about it is, she was supposedly buried in a lead-lined coffin, and she's put out on Althorpe in the middle of an island that's surrounded by water, which is so Camelot. The Lady of the Lake, And I've got several notations in my books where she said that she was Merlin and that she was going to revive Camelot and that she was, Will's Merlin and just all kinds of stuff that she was making comments about. But I do think that they did not want any access to her, because what happens is it's when you look at the truthness of cloning something, it will not have any connection to the female that carried it. It's like when Dolly the sheep was born, the egg was from a sheep. It was hollowed out, and then a cell from a sheep that had already passed was put in there, and then, of course, Dolly came out like the first original, but had no connection to the mother. So, cloning is a very unique capability, but it's not a hard science. People said we don't have DNA, whatever, when I first started writing my first book back in 1998, 99. And I'm like, whoa, you don't have to have the DNA all out there like that to clone. You just need a piece of cell, and all you do is you take and get the DNA out of the egg, you clean it out, and you just pop that cell, it could be a dead cell of me or you or whoever, and you put it in there, and then you electrify it, and it'll start dividing. And then once it goes through the gestation period, and put it back in a woman, just like in vitro fertilization. The moment that we learned how to do in vitro fertilization, cloning became possible, right at that moment.
I was watching Jim Baker the other day, and they were saying that they have proof that there's 157 documented cases of part animal, part human clones that are living right to this day. And I've seen pictures of them. I saw a picture of a pig with a man's head on it.
Well, they were growing ears and everything on the back of mice and stuff, and using that to grow human parts. And they've cloned a complete trachea, and they took a woman's trachea out and put that in, and now they've done organs the same way. They've grown organs in the test tube that are so that your body won't reject your organ. Stem cells are doing that. I mean, these are all scientific cases and scientific proof. But you can go back to the work of what I mentioned, The Isle of Dr. Moreau, where, there was a movie way back when, and they were taking things like the dinosaur eggs and stuff like that. We talk about Jurassic Park and make a joke out of it. But literally, you could do that. There's no doubt in my mind.
Bring the dinosaurs back, because after they plan on doing Agenda 21, where there's just small cities of people, and they want to make 2/3 of the United States wildland, they want to put the dinosaurs back out there.
Well, in my opinion, that they've always said that you can't regenerate this stuff, but you can. And like I say, cloning is not a hard science, and I traced it all the way back into the 1800s when I was doing this research for my book with a frog that was done, and so it's not like it's been a hidden thing. But you take people who've got plenty of money and black budgets and underground networking and everything else, and you can do on a desert island somewhere, just like that story of Dr. Moreau. I mean, it literally could be done. Or let's say any of the what I would say science fiction movies that we thought would never be possible, with cloning, it is possible. The thing about the shroud is that if on my website I talk about Ron Wyatt, and they have some YouTubes there that I would encourage people to go and look at on my website at drjoye.com, drjoye.com. Because the blood that he supposedly found under the cross where Jesus died in the grotto there, where he believed the Ark of the Covenant was, and he says he saw it and he got blood off of it, and that he took it to these Israeli scientists that did not know what he had. And when they rejuvenated the blood and spun it, it was alive. It was not dead. So, when you talk about cloning, sometimes you say, well, the dead cells may have degenerated or whatever, and they can't produce anything. But, if the blood was alive, like Ron is saying it was alive, and all the scientific data that I've seen on that doesn't look like it was ever fake. That's before the days when you fake stuff, I truly believe it was nothing at all. It was not difficult at all to use that to clone from the shroud. I mean, I just think it would have been the easiest thing in the world. And why wouldn't you do it? I mean, you know, some people would say, well, maybe for the sake of you just not wanting to do it, but these people who want to live forever and want to control the world and have access to the very thing that Satan wanted, and that was to be God. So, you know, if he's walking in the temple of God proclaiming himself to be God and has a lineage that gives him the right to rule and reign, and he's got a false prophet, they're saying, oh, my gosh, it's really him. We can prove it. And all these people, especially Catholicism, has always been taught that, you know, when a statue would bleed or cry, just think of the people that's been healed in the pilgrimages that were into Fatima. I mean, my gracious, I did a whole chapter in my book on Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666 about nothing but Fatima. And then I tie that into the connection to Fatima to Islam. And I did that in my new series, my Eshel Gal series, because then that ties it ties them all together. The Muslims and the Jews and the Catholics and everything else. I mean, the Mother Mary, and you can just kind of see how Fatima could be the connection for all the people to believe because of Mary, and it's amazing. Once you do the research on it, then you're kind of like, you can never close your eyes and say you don't know that anymore. You know, you can be blind all day long, but then when your eyes open, you kind of see. You can't go back and say, I can't see now. No, close my eyes. I don't want to know this information. Because the more you research and you really dig and you really look at this, you get a real big understanding that there is a major agenda going on, and that, yes, in fact, King Arthur is alive and well.
Well, you know, when you tell people that they're lizards or that, you know, they're murdering children, it's just so horrendous people don't want to believe it. But it does go on. Are you familiar with Kevin Annett?
Yes, and like I say, in my Beguile books, I talk about, you know, I did the research back when the royals were, we do about way into the royal lineages, where they would actually go get mummies, and they would eat dead pieces of the mummies and grind up their bones, consume their bones, and the cannibalism that was going on. And you know, that's where the Dracula connection comes in to, you know, Prince Charles, and he makes no beans about it because he does own the Transylvania area over there that the Dracula stories all came from. So, you know, they don't hide it. They can't hide it. There's too much. Once you get your hands on the historical documentation, you can't kind of go back and like erase it. A lot of people like to try to erase history, but you get your hands on the correct history, it wasn't something that was fake. So, you know, who were these people? And you can tie them right on back to the serpent lineages and back to the megalithic builders. And I'm talking about the people who built, the Mayan built temples and all these things. They killed humans. They ripped their hearts out. They drank their blood. I mean, this was the royal people did that.
And the sickest part about it is they just don't kill these children. They leave them alive while they're draining their blood and torturing them because they get a high off of the children. I don't know, the stress or the energy that it permits. I don't know, but
when you're doing torment like that, it causes a certain amount of hormones to be flooded into the blood, and that gives their pineal gland much more capability. So the torture, you can't kill them. They got to be being tortured while that's happening. And, you know, it's a terrible thing, but you just look at the number of children that go missing in our country every day that they never find. You know, you hear 1 and 2, they'll say, oh, so-and-so, we finally found this kid 20 years later, da-da-da-da-da. But you don't find the thousands that go missing every year. And amazing enough, I have a friend that does a lot of research about these areas of our country that are owned. You know, most people don't realize that the United Nations owns our national parks.
Yes, they do.
And you would be surprised, and he's doing a lot of research, on the numbers of people that go missing in those parks that are never found. I'm talking about
and
old
they don't tell everybody about it either.
Nobody knows about it. That's right. They go in and never come out.
You know, there's a man that he wrote a book called 411 about the people missing in the national parks. And when he started investigating it, and he was a retired police officer, he went to the parks and asked for a list, and they said they don't keep a list. And then when he started researching it, he started finding out that there were thousands of people that were missing from the parks.
That's
and
right.
that they keep this hush-hush. Because I imagine if they told people what was going on, people would quit visiting the parks.
Well, and it's strange to me. It's just like the national park there that's out on the Indian reservation that was really set up for the Indians, that when they turned around and they needed that area to put that Luciferian, they call it Lucifer telescope out there that the Vatican owns, they made the Indians have to get permits to go across their own land. I mean, please. There's something
a lot of those Indians come up missing, too. Those Indian children come up missing.
Yes. I mean, it goes on and on and on, but they keep the general public from knowing about it because, people, they keep us so busy having to work to try to make a living. And you got to get your children to school, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And when you come home at night, you got to fix supper, and, everybody's falling out because they got to get up the next morning and go again. You don't have time other than to sit in front of the tube and it tell you this, that, and the other to look at this stuff. Because once you get the time and you get, the ability to bring the information together, you can see the game that's being played. They're not.
So what do you think the point was of putting Prince William in the murals? That they're just going to flaunt it in our face? Or
that's exactly what they're doing.
I think they put it out there and they say, okay, now if you're smart, you'll figure it out.
Well, I've always said that, it's like when you go and you learn about, let's just use the Freemasons. You can go to a trial and you're sitting there in a jury and they'll raise their hands up and do these little signs that if you know that they're a Masonic, then they're giving you a hand signal that everybody else will say, well, he just raised his hands up. It's like if you get pulled over by a state patrol and he is a Mason and you go, is there no, something for the widow's son? And all of a sudden you have to, you don't get a ticket.
I have a target in Texas that she had to go to court, and she was very, very nervous, and she was spinning her ring around, just because she was nervous. And the guy next to her said, oh, are you affiliated with the Masons? Mm-hmm. She said, no. And he said, oh, I thought you were signaling the judge.
Mm-hmm. So it's all that stuff, and I have actually seen it happen, so I know it. It's not just something I'm just saying. It really does happen. It really does happen. So when you know what's going on, I was in a business meeting one time, and I was up against a guy about some jobs that I was trying to bid on. And the guy went to shake the other guy's hand that was bidding against me, and immediately I saw the handshake that he gave him and what level it was. I mean, I had already studied all that. So when he got ready to shake my hand, I gave him the old tiger claw kind of little thing that's really way up there. And, of course, women aren't supposed to know that kind of stuff. But it's
they do the same thing to
us.
They have a whole protocol of hand signals.
Oh, yes.
I know some of them.
Yes.
When they lift their hat and brush their hair back, that means the target is approaching. And when they rub their nose, it means something. So they have all these different signals.
Yes, that's right. So when I grabbed this guy's hand and I gave him that signal, the man I just locked onto his hand. And he stood there and looked at me because he knew that I knew that he had given that to that boy that was against me, with these bids, based on the fact that he was a Mason. And he literally, he looked like he could have just passed out. He turned white as a sheet, and he couldn't say anything. So I knew when I left the meeting, I knew what the deal was. It wasn't so much I had the better bid, I had everything, but I wasn't a Mason. So these kinds of things happen all the time, but if you don't know it's happening and you don't watch for it, then you don't realize, and you think, well, my gracious, why didn't I get that? They just didn't like me, whatever. There's a whole process involved in that. So when I say that this has been done in our faith, it is doublespeak. In other words, they're speaking to their members flat out. If you become fortunate enough, like you and I, to have done the research, we can pin them on it. But the majority, 95% of the people that are just commoners that are not involved in stuff, they walk around with it being flashed in their face all day long and never notice it.
Yeah, well, that's true. When if I wouldn't have been forced to start doing research, I wouldn't have known any of this. I would have been walking around like everybody else going, I haven't got a clue, really. That's
right.
What's so sad, that people don't have a clue what's going on and what's in store
that's
for
what
us.
The Bible says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. The Bible tells us that. And that's one thing that, when I found that God told Moses and them to be as wise as serpents. In other words, if you're going to go out against these people, you've got to know your enemy. And tactical warfare requires that you study your enemy and the fight that you're in. And to me, if you study this stuff and realize the fight you're in, you'll pick up on when they are talking to their people. I know one time I was watching a show on, I think it was George Bush that was on, giving a lecture to something, and he had a bunch of men standing behind him. I have to look up in my files. But there was a guy near to the left, I believe it was to the left of him, if I can remember correctly, and he literally was doing Morse code with his eyes. Well, most people don't know Morse code. It's so long ago, people, they don't use Morse code anymore. But I had studied Morse code in high school, and I literally was sitting there going, he's giving somebody a code. Like, is he telling the people that's not correct or whatever? And, I went back. I wanted to get a copy of it and could not find where you could ever get a copy of that transmission of that particular day when he was on. But there was no doubt in my mind the man was giving Morse code. And he was, I don't know if he was Chinese or Japanese, but anyway, he was not American. But they had that meeting. They'd all come out together, but he was giving Morse code with his eyes. So if you didn't know that, you just think the guy was blinking. You understand what I'm saying? It's no different than we teach our military. If you get, called into the country and they put you on camera, certain things you do. You can be saying, yeah, they're treating me nice, but then if you're, putting your ear to your right shoulder or something, they know that's not, in other words, what you're saying is not really what's happening. You're double speaking. You're saying one thing, but it means something else.
Right.
And that's what's happening all around us. And like you say, if we don't study it, we don't see it. You're just walking around as blind as a bat.
Well, the biggest problem with society nowadays is that they believe mainstream news. They believe all the things that are said on the television, which is nothing but mind control. And, it's like, okay, just tell us a bunch of lies, and we'll all sit here and go, oh, yeah, that's true. Just like this morning when they were announcing Planet X, they said it's on the outer part of our solar system. They were giggling and laughing on Channel 2 News, and they said, and the scientists said that it could cause some gravitational pull on our planet. And then she goes, what the heck does that mean? Gravitational pull, and it's way, way far away? And I thought that's why they told you to tell us.
Well, the thing about it is we know that something's pulling on the sun. I mean, just the solar flares, the change in the sun, moon, and stars, the planets, Neptune, Mars, all those other planets that are out there are being affected by something that's out there because we're seeing things in the universe that are going on that have never happened before. Planets flipping over, the rings of Saturn doing different stuff.
Are you guys getting snow down there where you're at?
Well, Well, they're saying by tonight we could get in South Georgia maybe a little bit of a light flurry in the air, but nothing that's going to stick. But, here we were at Christmas time. We broke records 5 days in a row with 80-degree temperatures.
Yeah. Yeah, up here we were in the 50s. And the thing is, all the storms that usually come across Michigan are going just below us. Our planet has tipped some. And I go on all the Nubaru, Planet X sites on Facebook, and I just posted again today, there's another big crack in the earth. I mean, there are so many sinkholes and so many cracks, and today we had two earthquakes, 6.9 and a 6.7 off the coast of Mexico.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing that tells us that we're living at the end of days, because we are getting these, what we call birth pains, closer and closer together, and their magnitudes are getting greater and greater and greater, and that's what it tells us that what's going to happen at the end of days. That these things, it's not that we haven't had wars and rumors of wars, or we haven't had earthquakes and we haven't had bad weather. It's that all of a sudden you've got all this happening at one time, and they're getting bigger and closer in number. So,
and see, the thing is, the people in the United States, they don't research like I do, and I research the news around the world. And the flooding like we had in Texas, this is going on around the world.
Around the world, the same way.
Being washed away. People are being washed away. Towns are being washed away. This is biblical flooding.
Proportion. Well, the thing about it is, like when I started doing my Beguile Volume 2, I was going to really try to look at everything that was happening. And when I started doing that, that looked like it got so big, because what I found out was when birds died in Arkansas, they also had bird deaths in China and Japan and whatever. So then I began to correlate, like on these days it might have happened here, but you might only heard about it because it was the United States, but it was also happening in all these other places. So it wasn't firecrackers going off. That's when you come to the term that there's a much bigger picture, and nobody's being told the whole truth about it. And like I say, but when I finished that Volume 2, I was astounded every day by how much more and more and more is happening with the earthquakes, with the storms, the winter storms. I mean, you think back, we never named a winter storm. Now we got names for winter storms. They're so bad.
Yeah.
And then we had a hurricane that was just off the coast of Africa last week or something. It was isn't this one that's going across called Jonas? Yeah, the winter storm. But I'm talking, there was a hurricane out in, I can't remember if it was near Australia or it was near Africa. But anyway, they're not supposed to start happening until it starts like June. So you're talking about 6 months ahead of schedule. That's never been there before.
Right. I'll tell you another thing that I'm seeing a lot of videos of is that people are videoing, they're hearing the sound coming from the sky, an eerie moaning sound and screeching sound. Well, you know what that is? That's the Titanic plates. They're rubbing together.
I think that when the Earth's crust is like that, and of course, and I talked about this in my Beguile series, is how the Earth is moving, and even your airport landing strips are not lining up correctly, and they've had to redo some landing strips because of that.
They had to recalibrate for the planes already. Yeah,
that's right.
Did you know that the Denver airport landing strips is in the design? From the air is the design of the swastika.
Well, I'm telling you that the Germans were on to something, and if it had not been for Hitler's scientists, we would have never had the NASA program, and the Russians would have never had their cosmonaut programs, because Project Paperclip is where we got all those scientists. And the thing about it, these scientists were involved with doing all these terrible things to innocent people, but because they were scientists, they came over here, and half of them went to Russia. They never paid a price for all the torture and terrible things that they did.
You know what it was? It was like the United States was like, oh, we got to get them before everybody else does.
Yes. And I hate to say it, our NASA, if we had not had them, our NASA program would not have ever happened.
Well, you know what I was saying about the animal thing with the animal body and the human heads on them, and I was listening to Coast one night, and a man had called in and said that his father had died about a week earlier, and he wanted to tell him something that had happened to him in the war that he had been holding in all these years, and he had to tell him. And what he told him was that he was the recon, which was the guy who went out and checked out for everything before the troops came in, and they came across a tunnel, and they went into this cave, and they found all these children that were in cages that had animal parts growing off of them. They had feathers coming out their back and their face, and they were screaming, help us, get us out of here. And when they went back and told the captain or whoever they had to report to what they had found, they said, what are we going to do? What should we do? And he said, we're going to blow that up. What kind of life would they have? So they blew it up. But see, they were doing all that animal testing crap way back then.
Well, I think that that's a lot of things that we don't know about what's really going on, that we're finding out that when people get ready to die and they've had experience with this kind of stuff, that they're trying to get a clean feeling about before they meet their maker, they start telling this stuff. And I think it's pretty interesting that you won't talk until you know that you, more than likely, that they can't come after you. And there's just been a lot of people who've done deathbed confessions. And you can't go like, why would they be telling this right now? To me, that would be the last time you'd be wanting to make up a lie.
Yeah, well, they did the same thing with Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe, she made the comment. Princess Diana made the comment. I mean, literally, I was looking back in one of my books to see exactly how I had written that. But what I said was she allegedly to have told friends in confidence that she was part of something that would shake the foundations of the world. Diana had thought about telling her secret revelation to the world when she was suddenly killed in the car crash in Paris. Her accidental death can only serve to remind one of the untimely death of Marilyn Monroe and Diana's own bodyguard, Sergeant Barry Manickey. Manickey was killed in a suspicious motorcycle accident that James Hewitt, one of Diana's lovers, claims was arranged, more than likely because Diana probably had told him too many secrets. So,
Did you know that the Queen had said at Christmas time that she was sorry about what happened to Diana, and then she made the comment, but we had to do what we had to do to protect the crown?
Oh, listen. Of course they had to do to protect the crown, because if she was going to come out and say that she had been artificially inseminated and that this stuff was from the shroud and she was carrying King Arthur, can you imagine what that would, she would stop the process of what they're wanting if she ever told that. And I find it very strange that the fountain that was built in honor of her in London looks like an egg in a petri dish being pierced.
Yeah, it goes
like
all
you
the
would
way around in a circle.
Yeah, that's right. Just like you would do if you were inseminating it with a cell and cloning. Why in the world would you put that as a memorial? I mean, it looks just like a petri dish where you're doing that when I'm telling you how to clone.
I know. I watched a video of that this week, and I was amused how all the people walk. There's a path that goes around with it, and all the people walk around and they sit down like this is so beautiful, and they don't even know what they're looking at.
It's cool. I know it. I just when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just can't get over it. But again, if you don't, it's like I show on my website. If you think that Da Vinci's painting of Jesus' Last Supper that's so famous, if you look at it, it looks like an okay picture. There's always been the question, was that Mary Magdalene leaning up against him? Had always been the question. But when you start looking at all the symbols and all the evil that's in that painting, then you're kind of like, that's not such a good painting. You got a different view of it. But until you can see and somebody shows you, you don't notice it. And that's what's happening right now. If you didn't pay attention to the little blonde kid and all these little paintings out in the Denver airport, and if you weren't paying attention to the fact of these things that, I've shared in my research about Hitler, and if you didn't know these things, you wouldn't put it together.
What do you think the gargoyle the suitcase means?
Oh, I think that's just the unleashing of the, fallen angels from the abyss. I mean, I just think that's those fallen angels and Satan. Anybody that's ever seen demonic entities will tell you that they are the grossest looking things, like those gargoyles. They have.
Well, I read an article today that the Supreme Court had gave a ruling giving Obama the right to put us in FEMA camps.
Oh, listen, the executive orders that I have written, and that's something I never get to talk about in radio shows, is about the executive orders that I wrote up in both of my Eden book and in the Beguile series. They're passing all these executive orders that are placing us under a law that we don't even know about. And what makes me so furious is we've got these candidates running in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party who have been, up there as senators and representatives who have allowed and not even let the people know what's going on. And then I'm like, why do we need to vote for you to put you back up there when all this has been going under your watchful eye? Supposedly we elected you to watch out for our best interests. And I'm like, what are you doing while you're up there? They're partying, they're drinking, they're not paying attention, they have big, people are paying them a lot of money, and they get out and go do those kinds of things. I've been around politicians enough and got to spend enough time, because I used to think I really wanted to be governor of Georgia, and I actually wrote a paper about that because I want to be the first woman governor of Georgia. And I had the chance to do some things at the Capitol with some senators and some representatives. And so I got to see how the game's played. I got my eyes really open on some bills and trying to pass things through, and who knows who and who knows what, and did you have a drink with them last night, and all this kind of stuff that goes on. It's a big charade.
I'll tell you, our governor up here in
Michigan's in
hot water right now. They're having another meeting over there in Flint about that contaminated water, and they said tonight on the news that he was supposed to attend that meeting, but they don't know whether he's going to or not, because these people want to tar and feather his butt.
Well, I always think about this. As much as Hillary Clinton has done, as much as Obama has done, we need to apologize to Nixon. Honest to goodness, I'm like, my gracious, and we need to apologize to some of these military people that's been thrown out of the military under a lot less worse situations than what Hillary's done. I mean, come on.
I looked at 157 top-ranking officers that were let go by the Obama administration, and the reason he's getting rid of them is he's putting his own men in their place so that when they do the because they had to take a test. I had Jim Garrow, he's a retired CIA agent on my show, and he was talking about they had to fill out a form. I can't remember the name of it. And one of the questions on there was, will you shoot American citizens?
Oh, yes. Yes,
if you did not answer yes, you were gotten rid of.
That's right. They wanted to know if you could, if you were called on to go against American citizens, that you, in fact, could shoot an American citizen. That is very much a part of all that. And, yes, it very is enough to make you really stop and wonder. If we've got all these elected officials up there supposed to be looking at this stuff and paying attention, that somebody's not standing on their heads up there and saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. But it's like they go up there and then they don't really look after our best interest anymore. So I'm kind of like, it's a big boy network and a lot of Masonic connections, and it's a mess. Our political...
Some of these generals are speaking out, They're on YouTube that are speaking out about what's the takeover and what's going on. And the thing that I don't understand, Dr. Joy, is everybody's like believing this dog. I call it a dog and pony show.
It is.
I don't believe Obama was crying about them children. I think he rubbed Vicks in his eyes and made them water, because the way his tears came out did not come out like a tear. The whole eye was soaked. He rubbed his eye with bring those
I saw
about.
that myself, and the first thing I turned and looked at my husband, and I was like, oh, man, crocodile tears. I said, now, here he is crying over this, and those poor people were on their knees being almost threatened with their lives, and he didn't even mention them when he went in there to do his last final address to the Senate in the chambers up there. You know, in my opinion, it like you say, it's smoke and mirrors, it's dog and pony.
Well, you know, he'll do anything to get our guns away. What did Hitler do? He took the guns away from the people, and then he took the people over.
That's right. And I mentioned that in my book, Even the Knowledge of Good and Evil, that every one of the people who had dictators who took guns, like Pol Pot in Cambodia, and like you're talking about Hitler, but just anybody that did that, that's what they did. They became dictators over their people, and they slaughtered their people. And that was one of the reasons that our forefathers put guns in our hands, so that would never happen. I mean,
well, you realize that after he did that speech with the big fake tears and everything, the next day there was a rush on all the gun stores, and gun stocks went up. That's the only two stocks that are up right now are guns and Walmart. Everything else,
they know that it's coming. People know that it's coming, and you can't not feel it. Because once you get a society that doesn't pay attention to the military, then people are going to go nuts. Because like I said earlier, if you don't follow rules, if you don't feel condemnation, if you feel selfie, me, and you shoot, and nobody can stop you, then, you know, you're going to have to either defend yourself or they're going to throw us under martial law. That's what they want to do, and then take everything you got. But you can't make these crazy idiots understand that.
Today about they were talking about the announcement of Planet X on the John Moore show, and there was a woman that was on there. I don't know what her name was. I only caught the end of it, but they said that, you know, they don't put a date, and no one puts a date on. Well, there are a few people that put dates on when the Planet X is going to come around. But you know what they said? They said, you want to know when, because the elite know more than us. They said, you want to know when Planet X is going to be coming around? When martial law goes into effect, because they got to do that first.
Well, like I say, they got everything in place, and that's one of the reasons the Sprout hasn't been told the truth about. It's the reason that Noah's Ark hasn't been told the truth about. It's the reason Planet X hasn't been told the truth. All this stuff is being set up so that when it all happens, it's a fast work. And it's a fast work because that's how they capture you. I mean, that's how you're put under this. And like I say, my research shows that the pineal gland is the final frontier, and once you can control a human body at a distance, you can line people up like robots and they cannot fight against it. So your conscience gets seared. You're not sealed in your forehead. You're not caught away in the kitchen away. You are, I hate to say it, you're just peanuts in the frying pan.
Well, did I send you a copy of the David Bowie video that he put out?
Oh, gee. Black Star.
Yeah.
Dark Star, Black Star. Black Star, is that what his name was? I think it's Black Star. Get a 5-pointed Black Star at that.
I think they induced cancer on him because he in that video he's pretty much warning that this is what's coming.
That is, I tell you, that is probably the most satanic video that I've ever watched to research. I can't think of one that I've seen that I thought was worse than that one was. To me, that was the worst. In fact, someone was asking me about it, and I told them that if they were going to watch it, that I prefer that they turn it down, don't listen to the music along with it, and watch the symbols and then look away, because I do think that that's an indoctrination of the pineal gland with what they're doing.
Well, I'd like to know why they're carrying the skull.
I just think that kind of goes back to the covering of Satan. You know, he was the covering cherub, and he had all those stones. He fell to earth as a fallen angel and mated with Eve and designed
and
his
the
own.
other thing is
he became the Black Star.
He's got his eyes bandaged with buttons sewed on the back. Like, and I thought, you know what that means? It means you can't really see. You can't really see. Even though you have eyes, you cannot really see.
Well, it's forcing you to use the pineal gland, and that was the research that I did, and showed that hypnotism and walking, not sleepwalking, how you can walk through a house with your eyes completely shut, not run into anything, or walk outside and walk around in the yard and never fall over anything. You've got something that's working that can see. And I think that's the whole thing. All that gibbering and shaking in that particular video that he does, that's all possession. And possession happens through the pineal gland. I mean, I just think that's your holy of holies. And if you bring the serpent up the spine and you open that eye up, then you're forever controlled by the dark star. And then taking and putting the scarecrows on the cross, there's no doubt in my mind when he said the spirit rose up and something came back down in it, that he's kind of alluding to what I'm saying, that if Jesus Christ died on that cross and we can resurrect that body, there's something else in it now. It's not Christ. When it's
one of our guests said the skull symbolizes the power of Satan. David Bowie is the vessel.
Well, that's what he was. He even said
the vessel.
He even says he was the great I am. I mean, so he says, and I was a dark star, but you got to remember that the dark star, wanting to be the great I am, is wanting to be Jesus. That's the thing. I mean, I think they're pointing to it. I just think they're straight out pointing to it, and they're laughing in our faces because they're going to pull it off. I mean, let's take a look at when Prince William and Kate came to the United States. They were like every paper, every news thing, your top celebrities, your top political people, they couldn't wait to be with them and touch them, and they even called them icons, and he doesn't bow down to anybody. People will say, well, the Antichrist is this, and I'm like, anytime you see that guy bow down, tells you he's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist bows down to no one. He's the prince. He's not going to bow down. Everybody's going to be touching him. He's the iconic figure. And right now, if he was to step up and say, hey, I want to be president of the European Union or whatever to get things back in order, they'd all be for it.
Well, there's sure fun in our faces, and if you pay attention, you can put the puzzle pieces together. If you walk along with your head in the clouds or you want to point fingers and be in disbelief, one day you're going to be in for a big surprise.
Well, you just can't write it off that we have got all these things going on. The strength is like the planet. We know that that's coming with the wormwood and all that stuff that's going to come in with that kind of mess. Again, we know that the Bible told us it's going to be like the days of Noah. It is exactly like the days of Noah. We talk about like the floods and the birds dying and the strange sounds and all this kind of stuff. So if you've got all that going on, at the same time it says there's going to be a false prophet, there's going to be the dragon, and there's going to be the beast, the Antichrist. So if all that's happening, those other guys have got to be here going along with it. And we've got 3 people that meet that criteria. And that's Prince Charles, because he's got red dragon all over him. And then you've got an iconic image of Jesus walking around in William, the great author, King Arthur. And then you've got the false prophet, who is Pope Francis, who meets the credentials, and I showed that in my Beguile series, of Peter the Roman. Because he's, according to St. Malachi's prophecies of the Pope, he's the final Pope. And there's a reason they moved Pope Benedict out of the way and put Francis in where he's supposed to be. So you got all 3 people lined up right where they're supposed to be.
We're living in strange times, that's for sure. But
just look at the recent virus that is going around that's killing all these unborn babies. That's the big news right now is this strange virus. Well, what does that remind you of? You think about back to the Egyptians when all the firstborns died.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're talking about something that's mosquito-based carried that, you know, was to get in this country. I mean, West Nile virus is bad enough. Encephalitis is bad enough, but you start something like that, I mean, you can just see the game being played. And then they were going to release all the mosquitoes that were genetically modified. Oh, my gosh. I'm like, now we got, you know, you can't go out of your house afraid you're going to get bit by something.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing I don't understand with this thing that's going on with the water over here in Flint is they know that it has lead in it, and so instead of pushing, I thought they put it back to hooking up to the regular Detroit water like they were before. They didn't. You know what they're doing? They're dumping all kinds of chemicals in that water, and now these children are all breaking out with these rashes all over their bodies.
Well, you know, what does the Bible tell us? That in the end of days, it's going to be people that have boils all over them and everything else. And it says, if the days are not cut short, that no flesh can survive. So we're seeing that happen.
Yes,
we're seeing
we
all these fish that have all these tumors all over them, and oh my gosh, you know, all these.
There was just thousands of squid that came up on the
Yes, I saw that.
Chile.
That was awful. Yes. Yes.
I mean, so many squid. I was watching the video. There were so many squid on the beach that they had to take front-end loaders and scoop them up, just buckets and buckets of them.
Yes, I saw that being done. And to me, I mean, you know, if you said, well, this happens every now and then, but this is happening every day somewhere, something major is going on like that. And it's too much. There's too much happening to totally disregard this as a conspiracy.
Well, we're coming up on the end of the show, so what would you like to talk about for the last few minutes, and what advice would you give? I know what advice we need to give everybody, and that's that they need to get their life straight with the Lord.
I guess that's probably the biggest thing that I would tell people is that what you sometimes see is not as it is. And today you're being beguiled more than ever of any time in history because you can't hardly trust the things that you see on the Internet or on the TV as being truthful, much less some of the books and even the Bibles that are being printed as if to being the real truth. It takes a lot to search out what is really, you know, what is real and what is being, you know, played out in front of your eyes to take advantage of you. I think it's a very terrible time for children even to be being born because of the sexual play and the change up of how sex is done. And oh my gosh, I feel for people who are trying to make their ends meet and they don't have time to think about stuff. I hope and pray that if they've got a question and they want to ask me, that they can go to my website. And again, that's www.drjoye.com, and my email is there because I'm willing to try to help people see and try to steer them in the right direction to find answers to some really tough questions because people are really hurting. The emails that I get and the stories that I hear and the cases that I've, you know, personally looked into and tried to help, it just will make your skin crawl. There are some really sad, serious, terrible things going on in this world, and it's getting so much worse. And I really do. I think that the only hope, and the Bible tells us, our only hope is through Jesus Christ. And if you're an atheist out there, if you're, you know, another religion, I just invite you to pick up the Bible and read it. Don't let somebody else encourage you not to do it. You do it for yourself, and then you make your own decision. So many times we base our desires and our thoughts on other people's words. And to me, the best thing you can do is to pick that book up and read it and get your own opinion. Because I truly believe that pineal gland that sits in every one of our heads is a communing device with our Creator, the great I Am. And He will come to you when you seek Him. And I just pray that, you know, people will do that. And like I say, the books that I've written has been to try to reach out to everybody of all ages, of all, you know, nationalities, of all races, of each religion, and try to show this is where it's all coming from. Pay attention so that you can make the right choice. Because in the end, it's a choice that is going to determine where you spend, or your spirit spends, eternity. And eternity, according to science, in pure life, is forever. And this is just a drop in the bucket to, forever. So you need to really know that you can't be going, well, I didn't know. You can't be going like, well, it was so-and-so's fault. You're talking to the Creator that knows everything about you, and everything that you think, do, or say, totally recorded, totally known. You can't hide. You can't hide in the closet. You can't pretend that nobody else knows. The great I Am created you with a way to know everything about you, and the hairs on your head. He can name and number every one of us. So it's real important to know the truth.
My advice is to take your blinders off and wake up.
Yeah, you got to do it. You've really got to do it. If not,
and even though it's not pleasant to
ride.
look at, I would just as soon go through the end knowing what's going on without walking around going, wow, now what's happening? But we do have one guest that has their hand raised, so let's see what they want. Yes, Arizona, you have a question?
Yes, I just want to ask Dr. Joye, I think probably Christians are more deluded in their view of their own religion than perhaps even a non-believer would be of what Christianity is all about, because I know a lot of Christians who aren't even redeemed. I mean, they think they're quote-unquote born again, and they're not.
Well, I would agree totally with you about that. I would really agree totally with you about that, because they don't want to hear a lot of the things that I even talk about, and it's scary because, like you say, they're kind of like Eve was. They know the word, but they're not putting it to practice. If she'd have put in practice what she knew, she'd never been beguiled by the serpent. And that's the problem, is that you can know stuff or think you know something, but if you haven't experienced it, if you don't know it, then you're going to miss the boat. And the Bible tells us that the path to heaven is a very narrow path. And so it is a sad thing. It does worry me, because Christians, to me, sometimes are playing church, and that's a very dangerous thing. And that's the way Satan gets the person who thinks that they're doing right, and they don't really know that they're doing wrong. And the more we get into the Laodicean churches of this age, where everything's lukewarm, then they're not really doing anything that's religious. It's just an act and a like going to work.
Yeah, well, it's happy church.
Yeah, and that I didn't know what it meant to be redeemed, to be born again, until it actually happened to me. And then there was no going back. I mean, I knew.
And, it says in the last days that Christians are going to be persecuted, and Christians are more persecuted now than they ever were, especially overseas. Jim Baker was talking about that today, about how the Muslims are actually taking the Christians and he said he watched a video where they cut these two children in half because the parents would not reject Jesus, so they cut their children right in half in front of them. And also, do you know that Obama is refusing any refugees that are Christians to come into our country?
Yes. It's all a game against Christianity, because you have to understand that all the other religions can accept, one God. But if you're a Christian, you know that one God has to be the great I Am, who had a son, Jesus Christ, that came and died on that cross and rose again to give us salvation. If you don't believe that, then you're not a Christian. So the Christians are the only ones that are standing alone when the other religions can unite and say, oh, we serve the same God with a different name.
Right.
We can't say that as a Christian. We're the only group that can't say that.
Well, we have to lay our lives down for him if we want to be with him, and that's just the way it is.
Well, you know, what I've always said is that the disciples had to die all tragic deaths. In fact, John the Revelator was the only one that lived into old age, and, of course, he was boiled and oiled and lived to tell about it, and then he went to the Isle of Patmos and then was released. But every other one of the disciples died tragic martyr, they were martyrs. And, I hate to say, but as Christians, we may have to carry that cross, and we've seen a lot of tragedy in these other countries that have happened to people who've had to stand for what they believed in and die for it.
Well, Al Cuppet had said in one of our interviews that, and he's the retired Joint Chief of Staff of the Pentagon, and he has been in the FEMA camps, and he actually came out and said that you will be rounded up and you will be given one last chance. They will kneel you down before the guillotine and tell you reject Jesus and accept Satan as your savior, or else you die. And that's what the guillotines are here for.
Well, I hate to say it, but, the Bible tells us that those last days are going to be some really tough days. And all I can say is that I do believe that there's a catching away. And in that catching away, Christ does come as a thief in the night. And I just pray that you got your lamp oil lit and you're watching for it and you got everything in order so that when that happens, that day of wrath is going to be really, really bad at the end of tribulation, that you can escape that as the bride of Christ. And I can't tell you enough that everybody needs to get their life and their house in order so that if that catching away does happen, that you're gone. Because if you're left, like I said, that's a bad situation. It won't be like the Left Behind series. Let me just promise you that.
Okay, Dr. Joy, I want to thank you so much for coming out again and talking to us. It's always a delight to have you on. We never have enough time.
Show.
2 hours to fly by.
We'll do it again because there's still a lot of things in my books that we have not touched on yet, but tonight was fun because we did touch on some things that we have not talked about that's in my books, and so that was fun to do that tonight.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out, and I will be back in touch with you. Maybe we'll have you come out again next month.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and God bless you in your work, dear.
You too.
Okay, you guys, I am going to do something a little bit different tonight. Usually I only have like a 3-4 minute bumper song, but since it's my birthday, I'm going to play a song that I really like, and let you sit back and enjoy it. And next week we're going to have Kevin Annette out here, and then I have booked 2 wonderful guests for the beginning of February. February the 3rd, I am going to have my Friday night show on Wednesday instead of Friday. And on Friday, we're going to have the holistic healing that week because I'm going to have Terrell come back and give us an update with his diagrams and that. He calls it the Black Star. I call it Nubaru. Same difference. But he's going to come back and talk to us about that. And then the following week, which will be February 12th, we are going to have John DiNardo come on. And he is going to talk about Planet X and what's going on. And he has a lot of research of the original articles that when they found Planet X back in the 80s. So that should be a very interesting show. But I want to thank you all.